All right, everybody, welcome back to the show today. We are diving deep into a pretty important topic,
Yeah, it's a big one.
population change.
That's right.
This is something that a lot of people are talking about these days. You hear about it in the news, you see it in your textbooks.
Yeah, you hear it everywhere.
So we're going to break it down, and we're going to use the study guide that you sent us as a kind of jumping off point.
Yeah, we're going to look at this study guide and really get into it so that you can understand
Swiftly.
what's going on with population change.
Yeah, and this is a really good study guide. It's got a lot of great information. So if you're using this study guide to study for your own social studies test, you're in good shape.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the basics. What is population and why does it change?
Yeah, well, population is just the number of people living in a certain area, and it changes because people are born, people die, and people move around.
Right. And sometimes you have more people coming in, sometimes you have more people going out.
Exactly like immigration and immigration, it's always in flux, it's always changing.
Right. And the study guide actually mentions this idea of carrying capacity. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah, carrying capacity, that's an important one. So think of it like this, the Earth has a limited amount of resources, right?
Yeah.
Like food, water, energy, and space, and the carrying capacity is basically the maximum number of people that the planet can support.
Right. So it's almost like a limit. Like, you go to a concert and they say, oh, we can only fit this many people.
Exactly. It's like a guest list for planet Earth.
Yeah. And I guess the thing is that, as time goes on and we have more and more people, we have to figure out how to make sure that we're not, going over that limit.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, right? Because technology can help us stretch that limit a little bit.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about agriculture. We've gotten much better at producing food, right?
Right.
And we can find new ways to get energy, like solar power and wind power, but there are limits to how much we can push it, and we have to be mindful of the environmental impact.
Right, because at the end of the day, we only have one planet.
That's right, only one.
Okay, so now let's get to this thing called the demographic transition model.
Okay, this is a cool one.
It sounds a little intimidating, but it's actually a really helpful way to understand how populations change over time.
Yeah, it's basically a roadmap that shows how birth rates and death rates change as a country develops, and that leads to different stages of population growth.
Okay, so it's kind of like a life cycle, but for an entire country's population.
Exactly, you got it. So let's walk through these stages. The first stage is called high stationary.
High stationary, okay.
And in this stage, both birth rates and death rates are really high.
So why is that? Why are they both so high?
Well, think about pre-industrial societies, right? Limited access to healthcare, poor sanitation. So a lot of people are born, but a lot of people also die. Young life expectancy is pretty low.
Right, so it kind of balances out.
Yeah, it's like a seesaw just staying level.
Okay, I'm picturing that the seesaw just back and forth, back and forth.
Now, as countries start to develop, they move into stage 2, which is early expanding, and this is where things get interesting.
Early expanding, it sounds like things are about to take off.
They are. It's like hitting the gas pedal on population growth because death rates start to plummet.
Okay, so why do death rates drop so dramatically?
Because of things like improvements in healthcare, better nutrition, sanitation, all of that leads to people living longer, healthier lives.
So, you get vaccines, you get access to clean water.
Exactly. All these things that make a big difference. But here's the catch. Birth rates stay high in stage 2.
So you've got a lot of people being born and not as many people dying.
Exactly. And that leads to rapid population growth. A lot of developing nations are in this stage right now.
I see. And that makes sense because, they're making progress, they're getting better, but they're still, kind of in that transition.
They're on their way.
They're on their way, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens next after early expanding?
Well, things start to level off a bit as we move into stage 3, late expanding.
Late expanding. Okay, so things are still expanding, but not quite as rapidly.
Right. Birth rates start to decline in this stage.
So why is that?
Well, there are a few reasons. Often it's linked to increased access to education, especially for women.
Oh, interesting.
When women have more opportunities, they tend to have fewer children.
Okay, that makes sense.
Also, people are moving to cities, and urban lifestyles are often associated with smaller families.
Right, because you don't need as many hands to work on the farm or...
Exactly. Space is limited.
Yeah, space is an issue.
It's more expensive.
You got it. Okay, so late expanding birth rates are going down, death rates are still low, so population growth is still happening, but it's slowing down.
That's right. Easing off the gas pedal a little bit.
Okay, and then where do we go from there?
Well, then we reach stage 4, which is where many developed countries find themselves today, like the US and Canada. This is low stationary.
Low stationary. Okay. So things have kind of settled down.
Yeah, both birth rates and death rates are low, resulting in a pretty stable population.
So it's like that seesaw from earlier is finally balanced.
Yeah, it's found its equilibrium.
Okay, but hold on. My study guide mentioned something called population implosion.
Oh, yeah,
That doesn't sound very stable.
that's stage 5.
Okay, stage 5.
Declining, this is where birth rates actually dip below death rates, so the population starts to shrink.
Whoa, okay,
Wow.
so it's instead of a baby boom, you've got a baby bust.
Pretty much countries like Japan and South Korea are facing this right now, and it comes with a whole new set of challenges.
Okay, so I can imagine like if you have fewer young people to support an aging population, that could put a strain on the economy and things like that.
Exactly. It raises all sorts of questions about how to provide for an aging population with a shrinking workforce.
Wow, this demographic transition model is pretty fascinating. It's like a whole story of how populations change and develop over time.
It is. It's a story with lots of twists and turns.
And it shows that population change isn't always about growth. Sometimes it's about decline, and that comes with its own set of challenges.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that it's a complex issue with consequences for everyone.
Right. And speaking of challenges earlier, we were talking about carrying capacity,
Mm.
that idea that the Earth has a limited amount of resources.
Right, like that planet guest list.
Exactly.
Right.
So how does that tie into all of this?
Well, as populations grow, we have to make sure we're not exceeding the planet's carrying capacity.
Right, because if we have too many people consuming too many resources, that could lead to problems like environmental degradation and resource depletion.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between meeting the needs of a growing population and protecting the planet for future generations.
Right, because we don't want to eat up all the pizza and leave nothing for the next group.
No, we want to make sure there's enough to go around.
Okay, so we've got this roadmap of how populations change and this concept of Earth's carrying capacity.
Mm.
What else is in your social studies arsenal?
Well, let's unpack the idea of brain drain and its counterpart brain gain. These terms talk about the movement of skilled individuals across borders.
Okay, brain drain sounds kind of negative.
It's basically when highly skilled or educated individuals emigrate from one country to another, often in search of better opportunities or higher salaries.
So it's like a country is losing some of its brightest minds.
Yeah, it can be a big challenge, especially for developing countries who invest in educating their people only to see them leave for greener pastures.
Right. And I guess brain gain is the opposite when a country attracts skilled workers from other places.
Exactly. It can be a huge boost for a country's economy and innovation, bringing in fresh perspectives and expertise.
So it's like a two-way street. The flow of talent can go in either direction.
Right, and it can have a big impact on both the sending and receiving countries.
Okay, so we've got population change in all its stages, the limits of Earth's resources, and this global flow of talent. It's a lot to
Yep.
take in.
It is, but it's all connected and it all matters when we're trying to understand how the world works.
Right. And it's not just about understanding, it's also about figuring out how to manage these changes and create a better future for everyone.
Exactly, that's the big challenge, and that's what we're going to explore further in this deep dive.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork. We've got the stages of population, change the limits of resources, the movement of talent. Now let's dive into how these concepts play out in the real world.
Let's get into it.
Let's see how this all connects to real life examples.
I'm excited for this one.
All right, let's do it.
We were talking about stage 5 earlier with declining populations.
Right.
Well, Japan's a perfect example of that. They've been dealing with this for a while now, and it's having a big impact on them.
Yeah, my study guide talks about Japan a lot. He even uses this term, graying society, which sounds kind of ominous.
It does a bit, doesn't it? But it's a real thing. It means the average age of the population is going up because you've got fewer babies being born and people are living longer.
So is it just like a matter of needing more retirement homes or something?
It's way more complicated than that. Think about it. A smaller workforce means fewer people paying taxes, supporting those social programs, like healthcare and pensions.
Oh, so it's an economic thing too.
Definitely. And then there's the question of who's going to do all the jobs if there aren't enough young people coming up.
Right, that makes sense.
So Japan's been trying different things to adapt. They're investing a lot in robots and AI.
Oh, wow. So like automation to kind of fill the gaps.
Exactly. And they're encouraging more women to join the workforce.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they're even looking at immigration a bit more seriously, even though it's been kind of limited in the past.
Wow, so they're really pulling out all the stops.
They have to. It's a big challenge.
So on the other side of the spectrum, my study guide also talks about countries with really fast population growth.
Right, right.
What are they dealing with?
Well, take Nigeria, for instance. They're a good example. They're in stage two, that population boom we talked about.
Oh, right. Early expanding.
Yeah, that's the one. So their population's growing really fast, and that puts a huge strain on resources,
Yeah.
water, food, energy, you name it.
And what about infrastructure? Can they keep up with all those new people needing schools, hospitals, transportation?
It's tough. Rapid growth makes it really hard to provide enough housing, healthcare, education for everyone.
Right. And you were saying earlier that cities get overcrowded.
Absolutely. People flock to cities looking for opportunities, and that can lead to overcrowding and competition for jobs and resources.
It's like a balancing act, trying to manage all that growth while still making sure everyone has what they need.
It is, and it's a challenge a lot of developing countries are facing.
So what are they doing about it?
Well, they're investing in family planning programs so couples can make informed choices about family size.
Okay.
And they're really pushing education for girls and women's empowerment because that's been shown to lower birth rates.
Right.
And of course, they're working on improving healthcare and sanitation, which also helps slow population growth down the line.
So it's like a long-term strategy.
It is. A lot of these things take time to really have an effect.
Okay, so we talked about Japan dealing with a shrinking population and Nigeria with a rapidly growing one. My study guide also mentions this idea of brain drain and how it can impact developing countries.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
India is a classic example, right?
It is. They have a lot of highly skilled professionals leaving to work in other countries.
Especially in those high-tech fields, I think.
Exactly. Places like the US, Canada, UK, they offer higher salaries, maybe better research facilities, more career opportunities.
So it's kind of like India invests in educating these really smart people, and then other countries get to benefit from their skills.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Some people argue it's just a natural part of globalization. People should be free to work wherever they want.
Right.
But others say it's a huge loss for developing countries.
Yeah, I can see both sides.
It's definitely complicated. There are no easy answers. Some countries have tried things like tax breaks or research grants to encourage people to stay or come back.
Oh, interesting. So trying to make it more appealing to stay.
Exactly, create those opportunities.
Now, on the flip side, we've got brain gain, right? Countries that benefit from an influx of talented people.
Absolutely. Think about the U.S. Historically, it's attracted immigrants from all over the world. Many of them brought incredible skills and ideas, and that's helped the economy grow and become more innovative.
So it's a real asset.
Definitely. But it also raises questions about how to manage all that diversity, making sure everyone feels welcome and integrated.
Right, that makes sense. It's not just about the numbers. It's about people and cultures and how they all fit together.
Exactly. Population change touches on so many different aspects of life. It's economic, it's social, it's cultural.
It really is a big picture issue.
And it brings up a really important question. How do we make sure all this change leads to positive outcomes for people and for the planet?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and that's what we're going to keep exploring in this deep dive.
Yeah, it really is amazing how all this stuff is connected. Like people making decisions about their families, and then that somehow impacts like global migration and the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always changing too,
Sure.
Like think about technology, like all this new stuff with automation and AI.
Right.
That could completely change the way we work. And that's going to have a huge impact on, who's working where and how many people are moving around.
Yeah, you're right. My study guide doesn't even mention AI, but it makes sense that it would be a factor, going forward. What else is coming down the pike that we need to be thinking about?
Well, we can't ignore climate change, right?
Yeah.
It's already affecting migration. People are having to move because of rising sea levels or extreme weather or just not enough resources. And that's only going to get worse.
It's kind of scary when you think about it. All those statistics we talk about, they're not just numbers. They're people's lives.
That's right. It's easy to forget that sometimes, but it's real people who are being affected by all of this.
So what can we do about it? I mean, are we just stuck on this population roller coaster, or can we actually steer it in a better direction?
Well, I think we can definitely make a difference, but it's going to take a lot of effort on multiple fronts,
Right.
We need to invest in sustainable development so we can meet people's needs without destroying the planet.
Right.
And education is key, especially for women, because when women are educated, they tend to have fewer kids, and that helps slow down population growth.
Right.
And we need to work together as a global community because this isn't just one country's problem, it's everyone's problem.
Yeah. It's like that old saying, we're all in the same boat.
Exactly. We sink or swim together.
That's a good way to put it. So it sounds like there's hope.
Yeah.
If we work together and make smart choices, we can create a better future.
Absolutely. And I think understanding all this stuff about population change is a really important first step because it helps us see the big picture and make informed decisions.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot today, not just for my test, but for like understanding the world around me.
That's great to hear. And you know what? Even if you're not in school anymore, this is stuff that's relevant to everyone because it affects all of us.
Absolutely well said. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today's deep dive on population change.
Yeah, it was a good one.
To everyone listening, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to keep learning and keep asking questions, because the more we know, the better equipped we'll be to face the challenges ahead.
Couldn't have said it better myself.